Well, there's a great deal of confusion in both US, UK, your area about what is the right approach to this current crisis. A lot of things were tried, zero interest rates, quantitative easing, massive fiscal stimulus, and you come with a budget deficit with it, guaranteeing bank liabilities, capital injections to the banks, these highly unusual measures. Well, we in Japan went through all of it. Every one of the things that were put in place, we had to do it 5, 10 years ago, or sometimes 15 years ago. And so for those of us who are in Japan, looking at what's happening, what's unfolding abroad, it's like a replay of what we just went through. And all the confusion in the policy debate, whether there should be more fiscal stimulus or less, whether monetary easing can compensate for less fiscal stimulus. These things we discussed it in Japan 10 years ago. And at first, when we were going through it, there was nothing else to look at, because anything that resembled Japan in the past, you had to go back all the way to the Great Depression in the United States. And that's a different country in a different era. So there was a great deal of trial and error, not knowing what is the right thing to do. And it took us about 7, 8 years into the recession before we realized that this is actually a different disease. This is no ordinary recession. Ordinary recessions happen because there's an overproduction of some sort, inventory buildup, or there's some inflationary pressures, the central bank is tightening monetary policy. Those are the typical reasons we fall into a recession. But the one we fell into, people were no longer maximizing profits. They were minimizing debt. And even with zero interest rates, companies were paying down debt. And no business schools or economics department anywhere in the world have suggested that such things should take place. These things are not supposed to take place because if companies are paying down debt in the environment of 0% interest rates, that suggests under ordinary theories that corporate executives are so stupid they can't find good use for the money even with zero interest rates. Then why should these companies be around? Companies should just give the money back to the shareholders and let the shareholders find something better to do with the money. That's the usual interpretation. And so something like that was not supposed to happen. But it happened in Japan for full 10 years. Rates were almost zero at 1995. Short-term interest rates were zero at 1995. And corporate debt repayment continued until 2005. Full 10 years. In some of the bigger years, the net debt repayment was over 30 trillion yen a year, 6% of Japan's GDP. Net debt repayment. So some companies are borrowing, but so many more others are paying down debt. So the net was 6% of GDP going backwards. And why is that so bad? Well, first of all, why did it happen? It's not that Japanese corporate executives suddenly went all berserk. They were doing it because they faced a balance sheet problem. That is, during the bubble days, they borrowed tons of money to invest in all sorts of assets, thinking that they're going to make more money. As the price bubble collapsed, liabilities remained, so they realized that you have more debt than what you can show on the asset side. And if your balance sheet is underwater, you're actually bankrupt, right? But there are actually two kinds of bankruptcies. You're bankrupt with cash flow or without cash flow. If you have no cash flow and you're bankrupt, that's the end of the business. You have to raise your white flag and you have to surrender. But if you have cash flow and balance sheets underwater, it doesn't matter whether you're Japanese or American or Dutch or Taiwanese or whatnot. That corporate executive will do one thing: use the cash flow to pay down debt. Because for all the shareholders and stakeholders of the firm, that's the best possible solution. Shareholders don't want to be told that the company is bankrupt, your shares just a piece of paper. Bankers don't want to be told that they're lending to the company with all non-performing loans now. Workers don't want to be told that there's no more jobs tomorrow because the company is bankrupt. So for all the stakeholders involved, the right thing to do at the corporate level is to use the cash flow to pay down debt, because asset prices never go negative. So if you continue to pay down debt, at some point your balance sheet will be balanced again. You say, I'm out of this problem, now we're going to start making money, and so forth. So it's just a couple of years, or at least that's what people think. Well, that's the right thing to do at the micro level. But when everybody does it all at the same time, what happens to the macroeconomy? Well, in a national economy, if someone is saving money, you better have someone on the other side borrowing and spending money to keep the economy going. And in a usual economy, the one we assume implicitly in all these economics, is that if someone saves money, the money comes into the financial sector. The financial sector will find some other potential borrowers. The financial sector will give that money to whoever can use it, and that person will spend the money against the original income. So if I have $1,000 of income, spend $900 myself, $100 saved, but this $100 go through the financial sector, someone borrows it, spends it, and then so $900 plus $100 against the original income of $1,000. If there are too many borrowers, you raise interest rates. Too few borrowers, you bring rates down, someone raises hands, pick up the remaining sum, and you go forward. That's basically the economy as we know it. What happens when you bring rates down to zero and you still don't see anybody borrowing money? Because if you're actually bankrupt, your balance sheet is underwater, you're not going to borrow money at any interest rates, and no one's going to lend you money either if they know that you're actually bankrupt, right? And so you bring interest rates down to zero, the $100 this household saved gets stuck in the financial system. No one's borrowing money. Everybody's paying down debt. So only $900 is spent. So economy shrinks from 1,000 to 900. The 900 is someone's income. That person spends it. That person decides to save 10%. $810 is spent. $90 going to the financial sector. That one gets stuck. Because as I said, the whole process took 10 years. So if you leave this system unattended, you go from 1,000, 900, 810, 730 in no time. And you might wonder, did anything like this ever happen? Well, as I said earlier, Great Depression in the United States was exactly this pattern. US lost half of its GDP in just 4 years, from 1929 to 1933, because everybody was paying down debt. No one was borrowing money. In this type of situation, monetary policy is largely dead in the water, because you bring rates down to zero, nothing happens. So if the government wants to keep the economy from falling into this deflationary spiral, and because the government cannot tell the private sector, please don't repair your balance sheets, right? Private sector has no choice. Private sector must repair its balance sheets. So the only thing the government can do is to do the opposite of the private sector, and that is borrow the $100 the government itself borrows it and spends it. Then 900 plus 100 against the original income of $1,000, the economy moves forward. That's basically what we realized was happening in Japan. And at first, we didn't realize that was the case, so we put in the fiscal stimulus, economy improves, and then we say, oh, the budget deficit is too large, we cut it, economy weakens again, because private sector is still deleveraging. And then we put in another fiscal stimulus, economy improves, and these people have nothing better to do, say, oh, the budget deficit is too large. So we cut it again, we fell. So we had this zigzag for full 15 years. And because this is not in economic textbooks, because something like this is not supposed to happen, as I told you earlier, no one gives us a direction of what is the right thing to do until we discovered it ourselves, that this is a different disease, a completely different disease. It's not a common cold anymore. This is pneumonia. And once that point was understood, we were able to have little more stability to the fiscal stimulus, especially after we made another mistake in 2001. Then after that, more or less fiscal stimulus was maintained. We finally climbed out 2005. The whole thing took 15 years.